Two men you've never heard of may have been responsible for 60 million deaths. But here's the thing. They weren't warlords or dictators or the kind of villains history usually gives us. They were congressmen, men with offices, staffers, and lunch meetings. They passed a trade bill, and 60 million people died. Let that sink in for a second. Because the trade bill wasn't about weapons or war, it was about eggs, and lumber, and wool. This is the story of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act. And it might be the most important economic lesson nobody ever taught you. Welcome to Not Your Average History, where the stories your textbook skipped finally get told. Before we get to the catastrophe and the congressman behind it, you need to understand the world they were operating in. It's 1929. The stock market has just crashed. Billions of dollars of wealth vanished in days. Banks began to wobble. Factories started laying people off. Farmers, who had already been struggling through most of the 1920s, were getting crushed by falling crop prices and foreign competition. America was scared. And scared countries don't always make smart decisions. And in 1929, the man responsible for fixing all of it was Herbert Hoover, the 31st president of the United States. A self-made millionaire, an engineer by training, a man who had built his entire reputation on being the smartest problem solver in the room. He had been president for less than 8 months when the stock market crashed. 8 months. The economy he inherited was already fragile. Now it was in free fall. Everyone was looking at Hoover's White House for answers. And across town, on Capitol Hill, Congress was scrambling to give him one. Two men in particular thought they had it figured out. Reed Smoot, a senator from Utah, a Mormon apostle who had spent nearly 2 decades chairing the Senate Finance Committee, the committee that controlled every dollar of American tax and trade policy. The Washington Post once called him the high priest of the protective tariff. And Willis Hawley, a congressman from Oregon, a former university president who had spent his career teaching history and economics. These weren't reckless men. These weren't fringe voices. They were two of the most experienced economic policy minds in Washington. And when men like that propose a solution in the middle of a national crisis, people listen, even when they probably shouldn't. Their plan was straightforward. Raise tariffs on foreign goods coming into the United States. Make foreign products more expensive. Force Americans to buy American. Protect American jobs. Protect American farms. It wasn't a radical idea. Hoover had actually campaigned on protecting American farmers with tariffs. So when Smoot and Hawley came to him with their bill, he was already inclined to listen. Their bill started simple. Targeted tariffs on agricultural goods to help struggling farmers. But then Washington did what Washington always does. Word spread fast. If Congress was writing a bill that could make foreign competitors more expensive and hand American industries a built-in advantage, every industry wanted in. Steel wanted protection, so did textiles, and chemicals, and lumber, and ceramics, and shoes, and glass, and furniture. It was a feeding frenzy. Lobbyist after lobbyist walking into congressional offices with the same argument, we need protection too. Our workers are suffering too. Our industry is dying too. And one by one, Congress said yes. What began as targeted relief for struggling farmers metastasized into something monstrous. By the time it reached Hoover's desk, it imposed tariffs on over 20,000 imported goods. Even tariffs that already existed were raised even higher, in some cases by 40 to 60%. The once simple farm bill had spiraled out of control. It was now a wall around the entire American economy. And the rest of the world was watching every single move. 23 foreign governments sent formal protests to Washington before the bill even passed. They were not making idle threats. They were telling America plainly, if you do this, we will do it back. And here's something worth understanding about that moment. In 1930, most working Americans were focused on one thing: surviving. So while the debate of this bill wasn't a secret, There was no social media. No cable news cycle turning this into a daily story. No way for ordinary people to truly understand what was coming and organize around it the way they could today. The professionals, however, saw exactly where this was headed. The economists, the business leaders, the foreign governments. They were all raising the alarm. DC heard them and kept moving forward anyway. In May 1930, just weeks before the final vote, a petition arrived at the White House. It had been signed by 1,028 economists. Not 10, not 50. 1,028 from 179 colleges across 46 states. Essentially, every serious economic mind in America had put their name on a single document with a single message. Do not do this. The tariffs would raise the cost of living for ordinary Americans who were already struggling. Foreign countries would retaliate and American exports would collapse. The farmers the bill was designed to protect would end up worse off, because without access to foreign markets, they'd have nowhere to sell their crops. It would not fix the crisis, it would deepen it. Henry Ford drove to the White House himself and spent an entire evening making the case to Hoover. He called the tariff bill, in his words, an economic stupidity. Imagine, Henry Ford, the man who built the American automobile industry, was begging the president to stop. He was ignored. A senior partner at J.P. Morgan later said he almost went down on his knees to beg Hoover not to sign it. Even Hoover himself privately called the bill vicious. He knew it would damage international cooperation. He had real doubts. But he was being pressured from every direction. His own political party, his cabinet, his closest advisors, all telling him to sign. The industries that had lobbied their way onto that bill had donated to campaigns, and politicians had promises to keep. Some cabinet members were so insistent they threatened to resign if he vetoed it. And Hoover, despite his doubts and all the warnings, couldn't find a way out. He signed the bill. On June 17, 1930, the pen hit the paper, and the world took notice. The retaliation was coming. Canada moved first. Canada was, at the time, the single largest buyer of American exports. More than Britain, more than France, more than Germany. And Canada wasn't even going to wait for the ink to dry. In May 1930, a full month before Hoover signed the bill, Canada had already imposed tariffs on 16 categories of American goods. Then came Britain, then France, Spain, Cuba, Mexico. Country after country raising their own tariffs in response to Smoot-Hawley. And here is what that meant for a farmer in the Midwest. American egg exports to Canada had been nearly 12 million eggs per year. After the bill passed, 168,000. Not a slowdown, not a dip. A cliff. 12 million. Down to 168,000. And that was just eggs. Remember, this all started in 1929, the year the stock market crashed and the Great Depression began. America was in crisis, and the rest of the world, which had been depending on American banks and American trade for years, was starting to feel it too. What the world needed in that moment was for economies to lean on each other, to keep goods moving, to keep money flowing. Instead, the Smoot-Hawley Tariff raised barriers so high that global trade had nowhere to go but down. When countries started raising their own tariffs in response, world trade, which was already struggling, didn't just slow down further, it collapsed. By 1934, just 4 years after Hoover signed the bill, global trade had fallen 66% from where it stood at the start of the Depression. Not because of the crash alone, but because country after country imposed their own tariffs in retaliation to the Smoot-Hawley bill. And the global economy that might have limped its way toward recovery never got the chance. The stock market crash of 1929 started the fire. Smoot-Hawley poured gasoline on it. Factory workers started losing their jobs, not because of foreign competition anymore, but because American factories couldn't sell their products overseas either. Everyday goods started getting more expensive, because the imported parts American manufacturers depended on were now taxed at punishing rates. Everything Smoot and Hawley promised would get better got worse. Unemployment, which had been around 8% when Hoover signed the bill, began to climb and climb. By 1932, nearly 1 in 4 Americans was out of work. More than 5,000 banks had failed. Hundreds of thousands of people were living in makeshift shanty towns. They called them Hoovervilles. But the story doesn't end in America. When the world's largest economy implodes and takes global trade with it, the shockwaves don't stay inside its borders. They travel. And in Germany, they landed on a country that was already on its knees. Germany had spent the 1920s being bled dry. Under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany owed billions in reparations for World War I. Debt so crushing that the country had printed money until their currency became worthless. By 1923, a loaf of bread cost over 200 billion marks. People brought wheelbarrows full of cash to the grocery store. But Germany was clawing its way back through the late 1920s. And then Smoot-Hawley hit. German industries, already fragile, already struggling to rebuild, suddenly couldn't sell their goods in the American market. As country after country imposed their own retaliatory tariffs, export opportunity after export opportunity dried up. Germany, which still owed reparations it could barely afford to pay, had its economic legs kicked out from under it. Germany's unemployment rate went from 10% in 1930 to 30% by 1932. 1 in 3 Germans were out of work. Think about what that means. Not just financially. Think about what it does to a person, to a family. Everything you worked for, gone. The life you were promised, gone. And when enough people feel that way at the same time, something shifts. People stop trusting the system that failed them. And that desperation, that raw collective anger, becomes an opening. An opening for someone who knows how to exploit it. Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in January 1933. He did not rise to power despite the economic devastation. He rose to power because of it. The humiliation, the desperation, the fury of an entire people who had watched everything collapse. That was his fuel. And that fury led to the most destructive war in human history. World War II. 60 million lives lost. Traced back to a trade bill that started as protection for American farmers. And to the 2 men who wrote it. Reed Smoot lost his Senate seat in 1932. Willis Hawley had already lost his in the Republican primary, voted out by his own party. Neither man ever fully accepted what their bill had set in motion. Smoot defended it until the end, arguing that the world's suffering had nothing to do with American tariff policy, that the real cause was the destruction left behind by World War I. He never connected the dots, or maybe he just couldn't bring himself to. After World War II ended, after 60 million died, after entire cities had been reduced to ash, the survivors sat down and asked themselves a question that should have been asked in 1930. What happens when the world stops trading? The answer was written in the rubble of Europe. So they built something new, international trade agreements. Economic institutions designed to make sure no one country could trigger a cascade like that again. For decades, Smoot-Hawley was held up by economists and policymakers as the ultimate example of what not to do. A cautionary tale taught in economics classrooms everywhere. And somehow, outside of those rooms, almost nobody knows it. In the past year, America has seen tariff rates reach levels not seen in decades. And the echoes of 1930 have never felt louder. We're not here to tell you what to think about that. History doesn't repeat itself exactly. But it does rhyme. And sometimes the rhyme is loud enough that you owe it to yourself to listen. 2 men, 20,000 goods, 1 signature, 60 million lives. This is not your average history.